Yes, that music can only mean one thing. It's time once again for the exclusive film and video report, where this week James Rana and myself will discuss a great man.
A guy so laid back that I'm literally speaking to you laid back.
Right, you have to recline as you talk about Bob Newhart.
You gotta love, hey Bob. Hi Bob.
The television career of Bob Newhart, yes, progenitor of the greatest drinking game known to man. And at least two incredible television series. The other two, not so much, but...
But actually, there was another one before, because he was actually an accountant. What's interesting is the fact that in 1960, I believe, is when The Button-Down Mind came out.
Right.
His album, which
is
The
Button-Down Mind of Bob Newhart
was
it was a huge seller, one of the top comedy albums until, I think, Von Meter's First Family record, but yeah.
But what's interesting about The Button-Down Mind, it's the most anti-stand-up comedy album you'll ever hear.
Well, yeah, because his whole act was based on one-sided conversations. You're hearing someone either on the phone or it's some. But I mean, that's the brilliance of it, that you're listening to. You have to fill in the blanks of and it's always funnier. You, the audience, you're doing half the act.
That album was #1 on the charts. It beat out Elvis, and it beat out the soundtrack of the Broadway company of The Sound of Music, Ghosty.
Well, that's how popular that record was, and that, of course, launched him into the stratosphere. And he did some movies. Catch-22, which was sort of I guess was that pre-MASH, or it might have been around the same time.
That was around the same. It was 1970, same time.
Yeah, it's around. So it might have been the year after.
But another little fun film where he played the villain, Cold Turkey, with Dick Van Dyke.
Oh yes.
He's the villain. It's great.
And he's actually a villainous character in Catch-22. But of course, the Bob Newhart Show.
That's the one.
What a brilliant show. We're talking about. I guess it aired and it probably started in 72, maybe.
I think it was like 72 to 78.
And it ran for a long time.
He canceled it on his own.
He pulled the plug on the show?
Yeah, he said it was time to go.
I think he did the same with Newhart in the 80s, didn't he?
Yeah, and he openly said, he's like, look, I'm not trying, it's not a power play, it's not a money thing, I think it's time to end the show.
Well, he did the right thing, because, you can start to repeat yourself, and I think Newhart was starting to repeat itself, that show. Only the first 4 seasons of the Bob Newhart Show are out on DVD. It's always that same old story. They release 4 seasons, and then, what about seasons 5, 6, and 7? You can't find them.
Well, I've discovered this network we have here called MeTV.
Oh, and they run it on MeTV?
Every night they have the Bob Newhart Show.
See, I watch it on the DVDs, but only the first 4 seasons. But I will say this, what a great opening. A tremendous opening of Bob Newhart getting out of work. Hello, ding, ding, the music plays.
What a commute on the L train in Chicago.
It's classic. It's just classic.
This is a reason why people should have called and made pledges.
That's right, because we can sing the Bob Newhart theme. And then the music softens when he comes home to Suzanne Pleshette.
But the cast of characters on this show is
you got Bill Daly.
Bill Daly is Howard. I always said it. It's the precursor to Kramer.
Oh, yeah, the wacky next-door neighbor who comes over with these non-sequiturs and bizarre situations.
And he's always raiding their refrigerator.
Right, it's not even a B plot, it's like a C plot, or it's like just a plot from another world. And, his apartment, he's always taking their furniture and stuff. And of course, he's a pilot in the Bob Newhart Show on I Dream of Jeannie. He was an astronaut, right, but wearing a similar outfit.
Yeah.
And, of course, you've got Peter Bonners, who wound up directing a lot of the shows.
He went up to Friends.
And he directed Happy Days. He directed a ton of stuff, but he's wonderful.
And he also directed one of the Police Academy movies, Mission to Moscow.
And you've got Marcia Wallace.
Oh, before The Simpsons.
The great Marcia Wallace.
20-something years before she played Mrs. Krabappel.
And she is just fantastic. It's a show that, when it was initially airing, I was too young to appreciate it. My father watched it.
Really?
He was a big fan. And that's the only time I would really watch it, if we were watching that block of television on CBS, I think on Tuesday nights. I think that was the last show. I think it was on after Mary Tyler Moore. I think it was like 9:30.
Because it was her production company.
Right. So I would sit and watch, that show with him, and he'd laugh, and I would laugh, just contagious laughter, but I didn't really get the humor until years later. It was being rerun at like 2 a.m. on Channel 9.
Yeah.
And I was up, obviously, late at night all the time, and I would sit and watch it, and that's when I realized, wow, this is such a great show. And I went back and started collecting the DVDs when they came out, and I watched that. I get up in the morning and I watch Petticoat Junction.
That's your 5 a.m. thing, yeah.
At night, I go to bed and I watch the Bob Newhart Show. And I think about myself taking that a similar commute, but not coming home to Suzanne Pleshette.
I loved his patience in the group psychology.
Oh, yeah, Mr. Carlin.
Mr. Carlin, you have that's Jack Riley.
Right. Then Tom Poston came on.
Tom Poston played his friend who was going through a divorce.
Yes.
And then the other character who was the voice of Piglet.
Oh, yes.
John Randolph? No.
John. It's going to drive me nuts. I know his name, and I can't think of it.
We'll find out. So anyway, that goes until 1978. He ends the show. 4 years later is Newhart with yet another beautiful young wife.
Right. He went from Suzanne Plachette to
Mary Fran.
Mary
The late
Mary Fran. And then at the end of it, he went back to Suzanne Plachette. But that first season of the show shot on video, the rest of the season shot on film.
Yeah, and you could tell it's really that
beautiful theme song by Henry Mancini, just as memorable as the Bob Newhart Show. Lightning struck twice.
I know.
For Bob Newhart, he had an incredible cast built around him.
You have, of course, Mary Fran. Tom Poston, he and Tom Poston are teamed up. It's phenomenal.
Oh, it's incredible.
You have Sadler. You have Larry, Darryl, and Daryl.
Yes, of course.
Then you have actor.
They were hired for that one episode about the witch, the so-called witch buried in the basement.
Was that it?
And that was and then they were so popular that they kept bringing them back, and then they became part of the cast.
You would have been a very good Larry.
Thank you.
You would have been a very. But then we replaced.
I don't know how to take that, ladies.
We replaced the character. We replaced Peter Bonners, and we bring in
not Peter. Yes.
We replaced him. First, then we have Steve Campman, who goes on to write a great film called The Couch Trip.
Right. He was great in that role, and I always say that.
You like Kirk?
I love Kirk, the next door neighbor. And who was the girl before they got Stephanie?
That was the niece or someone like that.
Yes,
I
thought she was adorable, that girl.
But that's not working out, and so Campman gets to leave because actually he gets a gig writing for Rodney Dangerfield. He writes a screenplay for Back to School.
Right, so he's got like a lot of work to do. He doesn't have to stick around and be on the show.
Yeah. Campman's fine. So they bring in Peter Scolari, who needs a job.
Right, because Bosom Buddies had just been canceled.
And his partner, Tom Hanks, is now
he was going on doing Splash maybe around that time. So you have Julia Duffy,
who's adorable,
and she's great.
Stephanie,
totally different character than the niece that was initially there.
Yeah,
and Peter Scolari trading on that yuppie craze that was happening in the 80s.
Michael and Stephanie, he has the big, hi, Dick.
Right.
That's my Scolari.
All that there.
Hello, Dick.
I'm glad you were able to break this out for this episode.
Why didn't we do this during the fundraiser?
I know. We should have talked Newhart. But what a wonderful show. The great thing about Newhart, much like the Bob Newhart Show, on Newhart, everybody in the town was insane, essentially.
He's the only...
But they all thought Bob was insane.
Yeah, he just does not fit in. He never fits in. And the final episode, I think, is one of the greatest series finales ever. Playing, we get the two Darryls talk. They say quiet.
Yes.
And they have their two wives, these two young wives. And one of them, believe it or not, is a brunette, Lisa Kudrow.
Oh, really?
That's one of her first TV roles. She plays the obnoxious wife.
So Bob gets hit in the head, wakes up, and he's back on the set of the Bob Newhart Show with Emily. It's Bob and Emily in their bedroom. And he said, I've seen him talk about this on television and on documentaries, that the audience broke into applause once they saw the set. Because that's how well-known and beloved the Bob Newhart Show. Once they saw the set for the bedroom, they all started applauding because they knew what was coming. It's one of the great, and I remember watching it when it aired.
I remember that so well.
Right, and I remember sitting with my father, and when he saw the set, he was like, "Oh, I can't believe they're doing this." Now, nowadays it's not uncommon for shows to be meta like that, to reference other things. But in the 80s, that was just unheard of.
Well, this was 1990.
So so the tail end of the show, the very last season of the show. And again, one season we got of that on DVD. We got the first season, never the rest of them.
They don't do the finale?
No, it's not on DVD.
Are you kidding me?
No,
the finale of the Bob Newhart Show?
It's considered one of the greatest moments on the last episode of MASH is out on DVD. The last episode.
The last episode is so long of MASH.
Everything.
But anyway, it's very funny. He says, I can't do it. You could do a Newhart. He says, I was married to a blonde who wore these sweaters.
Right.
He asks Emily to wear more sweaters.
Right, that's at the end of it. You should wear more sweaters.
And then that actually created a TV movie based on that, a special.
Yes, it was it's a rarely seen TV special.
It's not very good.
Well, but see, it's not supposed to be a sitcom episode. It's more of a clip show for the Bob Newhart Show, is really what it is. And he comes out and he talks to the audience, and they sort of pick up where they left off with the season finale of Newhart and trying to work in both shows. It's funny for what it is. I mean, it really should have been a half-hour thing as opposed to an hour-long clip show. It would have been better.
What's interesting is that in the original Newhart, he and Bob and Emily always talk about having a child, but they never do. They almost adopt. Then in Newhart, they never have children. But then he gets a third show, which never worked for me, Bob.
Right.
Which I just did not like.
I could not see Bob Newhart as a comic strip artist, much like Ted Knight doing Cosmic Cow on Too Close for Comfort.
Monroe.
Right, but here we have Bob and Betty White. And that was only one season, that show. And I remember it was like the big thing, Bob's return to CBS.
And his daughter is played by Cynthia Stevenson, who had co-starred in that movie called The Player. And her best friend, her kooky friend, is played by Lisa Kudrow.
Again, the Lisa Kudrow factor working in Bob Newhart's favor.
Where's Rachel?
But yeah, exactly. It was last week. But here's the thing. That show, that one season, is on DVD. You can see all those episodes.
Why?
You can see all those episodes. And then people forget. People have sort of forgotten that show. I mean, Bob Newhart is lucky because lightning struck twice, and that rarely happens.
Yeah.
So he's got two colossal TV shows. One, I think, better remembered than the other. I think the Bob Newhart Show is better remembered than Newhart, because I think the Bob Newhart Show is just on more.
Yes.
Newhart, it doesn't really run and repeats all that much. And then then came George and Leo.
What's interesting is George is Bob Newhart's first real name.
Yes, there you go.
George Bob Newhart.
George and Leo, which was teaming Bob Newhart with Judd Hirsch. An unlikely combination.
I never got the show. I didn't like it.
I didn't like it either. I tried. I have some of the episodes on tape. I know that, what's his name? Jason Bateman, I think, was his son on the show.
Okay.
And Larry Miller had a great role it was, again, a small New England town.
Yeah.
And it was supposed to be, the whole gist of the show was like Protestants and it's a Protestant family and a Jewish family, and the kids get together and they have to get along. And of course, Bob Newhart would be the Protestant guy,
of course,
Judd Hirsch being the Jewish guy. And it was how their personalities clashed. But the problem with the show was that there was just no chemistry between Judd Hirsch and Bob Newhart. When you have Judd Hirsch in a show, you want him to be the focal point of the show. Taxi's an ensemble, but Judd Hirsch is really the focal point of that show.
He is the straight man. He was the star of that show, and everything happens around him.
Right.
And
Dear
Newhart,
John, same thing.
Brilliant cast. Everything on Newhart happens around Bob. You can't have two people where everything happens around the two of them.
Right. If you had a show back in the 50s that starred Milton Berle and Bob Hope, it probably wouldn't have worked.
No.
Because they're just too big on their own, and they sort of cancel each other out. And that's kind of the problem with George and Leo. That is not on DVD.
You know, it's interesting. Two other quick things about Bob Newhart. Right after Newhart, he did a really very sweet little movie. I remember. I can't believe it's from '91 now, where he plays an aging Vegas comic whose co-star, his sidekick, is a chimp.
That I've never seen.
A lovely little movie.
Thankfully, as you describe it, I'm glad.
A couple of years ago, very quickly, he had a very dramatic guest run on ER.
Really?
And it was his character committed suicide.
And this is Bob Newhart. See,
Bob Newhart. He didn't even answer the phone. I wonder if Bob...
He didn't even answer the phone.
He didn't answer...
He must answer the phone in every... Because I know he built his career on answering the phone.
I wonder if Bob now uses a Bluetooth.
You're absolutely right. Part of his act was sitting there and having the... What do you do now? Yeah, you don't even have the prop. The prop is gone. You remember what he used to say on the driving instructor sketch? Mrs. Webb... just how fast were you driving when the previous instructor jumped from the car? Do you remember that?
Do you know he hosted The Tonight Show 86 times?
86 times. We are done. We went really long on this. But I think he casts a long shadow, Bob Newhart. So there you go, folks. Bob Newhart on the exclusive Film and Video Report.